we've got a panel to round things off here at the Esports Innovation Stage. So, what I would suggest as well, just so that you know, everything's being recorded, so you can watch it back. Everything that's here will be available in the video vault for the event. So if you've missed what's taking place in the stage next door because you're in here, you will be able to watch that and vice versa. So we'll have the final panel of the day. Now I'm going to moderate this panel, and it's going to be about esports. Obviously, it's called Riding the Wave, and it's about how to join the 14 million esports enthusiasts in the MENA region, and of course the many 240 million experts enthusiasts before worldwide. So we're going to be talking about some of the topics that we've already seen this afternoon and some new ones, and basically wrapping things up. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, and I hope they're here in the room, Anirudh from Loco, Christoph from Virtex, Klaus from YaLLa, and Soham from Gamerji, our track sponsor. So please come to the stage, and a round of applause for my final panelists of the day, please. So then, thank you. Riding the wave, joining all these millions of esports players and enthusiasts. Now, we've had plenty of actionable advice this afternoon. We're going to round off the day by looking at some of these topics and diving a little bit into them and sharing your experience. So before we do that, I'm going to begin by asking you all to briefly introduce yourself. Tell us about your business, set the scene, let us know who you are and what you do. Let's start here.
Check. Yeah, so my name is Klaus. I'm the founder of YaLLa Esports. I also did the first panel and I'm doing the last one, so I guess you really wanted me to stay the whole day, but here I am still. So YaLLa Esports is a boutique marketing agency focusing on gaming. We are kind of Middle East OGs. We started in 2016. It was more of a team, but now we are focusing on events and campaigns and just helping, to pave the way for this gaming to thrive here. Because look, it was much harder in 2016.
I'm sure. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Christoph, co-founder of Virtex, and we basically bring the stadium experience to fans at home, and we do that by using 3D technologies like Unreal Engine, but also XR, and basically building virtual environments that are then hosted by tournament operators, teams, or even individual streamers. They can host their communities there and basically deliver a more interactive community moment, as it's basically like a large-scale multiplayer environment where everyone can hang out and enjoy the show, and that's the idea.
That's great, thank you. I love that. We're going to come and we'll have some questions about that later on as well. Go for it. Oh, you want to flip that up?
Hi, I'm Soham, founder of Gamerji. We are an esports platform hosting tournaments for more than 7 million gamers across India, Southeast Asia, and now MENA. Hosting for more than 24 titles that we conduct more than 1,600 scrims on a daily basis. Ideally, involving the grassroots and scouting the amateur talent and providing them with a platform, and they can not only showcase their skills but also make a mark in the esports industry and hopefully build careers going forward.
That's great, thanks. Oh, and we saw your video at the start of the track this afternoon, so we've seen the app as in action. Thanks, go for it.
Hey guys, this is Anirudh. I'm the founder of Loco. Loco is India's largest game streaming app. We have over 60 million users, and I also grew up in the region, so we're expanding to the Middle East as we speak. We have our beta app live now in Arabic, which is seeing great response. And really excited about seeing the story of both these regions grow together.
Great. Now we're going to talk about some of these things. We're going to talk about the region. We're going to talk about some specifics, some of the challenges and the opportunities. But let's start with a really broad question. And let's start again down this end with Klaus and move down. Look, what are some of the current trends in gaming and esports that everyone should be aware of in this room? Not everyone here is an esports expert. So do you want to just set the scene? Like if you had to kind of put your finger on, it could be which games are just obviously the biggest in the region, or which trends you see worldwide, or things that people should be aware of. Draw our attention to something in that we should be aware of, a trend or something like that, and we'll go down the panel that way.
Wow, that's a very that's a really broad question. I would say, obviously the trend, to be honest, now is this whole kind of like, okay, is it Web 2, is it Web 3, Okay. For me, it's like just gaming and esports, right? But I would say that the CS2, that's definitely a trend that I'm hoping to, pick up. I mean, we don't have like a new version of CS for a decade. So maybe it's not yet there, but definitely it will be a trend that, the esports scene should watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. That's very interesting. And it's an interesting point about the whole Web3 thing as well. I wasn't specifically going to dive into that. Maybe if there are questions at the end, but there was a lot of, at GDC this year, there was a lot of actually good games that had Web3 components in them, maybe for the first time. Sorry there, Christoph, do you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we've seen a lot is just a big emphasis on sustainability of the ecosystem this year. Seems to be a really big topic and trend. Even Riot felt like they had to make an announcement and be like, yeah, we're really committed to this as the future of sports. And we actually also own up to some of the mistakes we've made, kind of inflating this entire ecosystem a bit too hard. So it's kind of like, I think, a very healthy kind of situation, but at the same time also very challenging for a lot of organizations. So I think this is also just currently very top of mind and an important topic.
Yeah, interesting. Go for it.
Well, still the trend stays with battle royale games. Most of whether it be CS or Fortnite or PUBG Mobile, obviously, and with that trend, we especially in developing nations, we see a lot of trends, especially being towards mobile gaming.
Yeah.
Right, which is very different from what we witnessed at the U.S. at the GDC or probably in Europe. But with that, obviously there are a lot of good AAA titles that are focusing on mobile gaming. Though a lot of esports athletes might disagree that still the esports or the gaming holds in consoles or PCs. But with the cutting edge of mobile devices also, that's a trend that is becoming very, very popular, especially in the developing nations where PCs or consoles are not that affordable for the masses.
Yeah, that's a really good, absolutely. Well, I'm from Pocket Gamer, so of course I believe in mobile. So, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think there are a few different cuts of this question that I take. The first is, what is the audience watching, right? That's what we see on our platform. And if you look at the games that they're watching in the Middle East and they're watching in India, they're actually pretty similar. You look at the Play Store data, it's the same. So when you see PUBG Mobile, you see Free Fire, you see Clash of Clans, these kind of games on the mobile side. On the PC side, obviously, Valorant is doing very well. CS2, everyone's excited about. So I think there's a lot of uniformity in the way gamers are thinking. Having said that, the entertainment itself in different countries is different. So, you cannot group Saudi Arabia and Egypt in the same way because they're different, right? Which is very similar to what, and Soham and I have worked a lot together in India. It's the same thing in India, right? Different states speak different languages. There's disparity in income levels. So I think there is also a need to recognize that and build for that versus a giant monolith coming and, giving us one size fits all. So I think that's something that's been really interesting. And I think, obviously, from an economic point of view globally, as Christoph mentioned also, there is a need for resilience and there's a need to about sort of the P&L of the whole thing versus just focusing on L. And I think lastly, I think in the region, we are very lucky that there's regulatory support for esports. And I think very forward-looking leadership has recognized that esports is very similar to sports. Yeah. And much like there's been investment in, Abu Dhabi investing in Manchester City or Qatar investing in PSG, there's also a recognition that gaming has to be invested in. And we're seeing, obviously, 966 is a sponsor here. So, what the South F and Savvy are doing. So I think that's really good. And I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, it takes away a lot of the regulatory uncertainty that many other geographies have.
That's all great, and we can come and tackle each of those topics there. To your first point, absolutely. I saw the talk this morning by Jeff from iDream Sky. He was talking about localization, and he was saying how important it is to not just assume that means translating into Arabic. In fact, there are 16 distinct regions, right, that probably need their own approach. But let's stay with you for a second there, if we can. You mentioned the regulatory support. I've got a few questions I want to get to, but I'm going to skip ahead to that. How important is it that there's government and institutions and bodies that are backing esports? I mean, is that a thing that how essential is that, and what needs to be done?
I think it's huge, right? Because what entrepreneurs need is, we are already answering a bunch of different problems or solving a bunch of different problems, right? Those are tech related, team related, financing related. Now, if you add in a regulatory, overhang there, then it creates difficulty because you can't plan for the long run, right? How do you, plan cash flows? What kind of tech do you build? What kind of compliance systems do you build? When there's government support and they're willing to work with you and make it clear on what needs to be built and how they'll support you, makes our job much easier, and then we can actually focus on just the company building side versus constantly worrying about what the government is doing. It also, obviously, the biggest balance sheet of any country is the government.
Yeah.
So them opening up the balance sheet then trickles down through various venture capital funds and financing rebates, etc., and allows us to bring events to people, allows us to showcase what the power of esports is. I mean, if you went to the Blast event in Abu Dhabi last year, fantastic. Right, we have Gamers 8 coming up in Saudi Arabia soon. Fantastic, right? So, PUBG Mobile Finals happened here in Dubai. So it really provides a grand stage. And look, this region now is hosting Formula One, hosting NBA games. So there's no reason why esports doesn't find the space in that calendar. And again, government support helps tremendously there.
Perfect.
I would actually
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually briefly add that it fills this void left by others in terms of investment opportunity, in terms of security, stability, and for those that are forward-looking and really believe in it, it's almost like crazy that capital investors are leaving it to the governments to pick this up. But on the other hand, for the region, for example, it's a huge opportunity because it is the future of entertainment, of sport, and it's basically making sure that it holds a major stake in it. And at a bargain price, I would say, at the moment, because everyone else in the world is like, I don't know if esports is so sustainable, where are the KPIs? And so it's a great moment in terms of value for money and to own a stake of the future here.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
So-
no, absolutely. And with that, it also generates a lot of awareness and conviction in the region.
Right, yeah.
Right? I mean, we all remember the times where our parents used to tell us that you cannot, spend time gaming. It's a distraction from your academics or your school. And then obviously government taking initiatives and also regulatory bodies taking initiatives like what we are witnessing today, and also a lot of other events that Anirudh just spoke about, not only builds that conviction, but also builds that confidence amongst the growing generation to choose gaming and esports as a possible career option. And I don't only mean by just participating in esports tournaments, I also mean parallel gaming career options like developing games, or probably becoming a programmer or an animation artist or a content creator. That entire ecosystem kind of comes together when there are government initiatives and especially regulatory bodies that kind of handle that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. The symbolic value of the support from the government can't be overstated. And to your point, absolutely right. I should tell my parents that the time I spent playing Doom was more important than the time I spent doing my French homework. Right? That's for what I need to do now. Klaus, let's come to you. I'd just like to stay with that point a little bit about that there, and talk a little bit about schools and education. Over in the other hall, it's the schools day today. You probably saw all the kids outside. They're there. One of the topics that's come up a couple of times here today is that actually parents don't necessarily see the value of gaming, perhaps as not even just as a time waster, but as a career. Our last speaker joked about that as well as the government supporting the games and esports industry. Do schools have a role in that as well? And how do we kind of change the perception of games and esports for the next generation?
Yeah, schools definitely play a role. A lot of schools have now started their, esports initiatives, kind of like they go like, we have a chess club and swimming club and an esports club. Unfortunately, though, many esports school initiatives is basically some PCs in a corner, and it's just something that they put on the brochure. There's a couple schools that actually do something active. But to go back to the whole kind of like government and school and like seal of approval for gaming to make it a career, like 100%. Like we started YaLLa Esports in 2016, and then there wasn't even a trade license for any sort of gaming or esports company. Like I tried to explain to the government what I'm trying to do with my business, and I think I ended up registering like an internet content provider company. That was like the closest thing. But now we have, we have 10 full-time employees in our office in JLT, young, it's or actually most of their first job, and they now need to kind of explain to their parents, like, what do they do? And now, finally, their parents actually kind of understand and are almost proud of like, their kids working, or, well, sons. I mean, not kids anymore. I call them kids sometimes. But they're working in esports and gaming, and their parents understand what, at least, like, ballpark what they're doing.
Yeah, I wanted to add, look, this is my second startup. Before this, I started one of India's largest digital entertainment companies. And one day we created a position called meme maker.
Okay.
And nobody understood what it was. And today, legitimately, some of those guys are India's biggest influencers, right? And they're making tons of money. No parent is complaining at that point. But having said that, and the same thing is true for gamers now, and we've seen it in multiple geographies, right? We've seen it happen in America, we've seen it happen in China, we're seeing it now in India. It's the same thing here. I think that awareness is building amongst parents, and it's important to also address their concerns. So whether it's around screen time, whether it's around violence, those things have to be addressed. But you'll see a lot of different age groups are playing different games, right? So it shouldn't be all grouped also in the same way. Like spending time in Roblox is not similar to playing YaLLa, right? Like it's a very different experience, different age group, different, and a lot of kids are just hanging out. They actually don't even care what the game is that much, right? As long as it facilitates interaction and their friends are playing. So I think from a awareness perspective, platforms like ours have a big role to play to show those stories. And so in India, we've done a bunch of non-fiction shows to show that. So there are things like, we have shows like Dream and Stream, which is to show the stories of some of, people like, our friends here who like, when he started, he's saying, nobody even recognized the company, right? And he's not alone. Lots of stories like this of people who, now are truly trailblazers and pioneers, and showing those stories is important. We show what the parents of those big players are also doing, right? So when you show those stories is when other parents can learn from that. And I think there has to be enough investment, both from platforms like ours and other associated companies, to show and share those stories.
That's interesting, very interesting. Absolutely. We're about halfway through, so I'm going to change tack a little bit. I want to talk about, if you like, the kind of business of being a pro player. Teams everywhere, not specifically in the MENA region, can kind of face difficulties when they become professional, and how they sustain that life as a professional gamer. Let's switch and talk about some of that, and talk about the professional gaming environment. What are some of the obstacles that teams face when they want to become professional gamers? We talk a little bit there about people getting careers in the games industry. So being a pro gamer, what are the pitfalls of that?
So we started in 2016 as a pro gamer. I had this aspiration of creating the ninjas in pajamas of the Middle East. Like that was it, right? I'm from Finland, and I was a pro CS player, but that was like 1.6. There was no money, But now, for example, today, unfortunately, basically we don't really have an active team as a competitive esports team anymore. It's purely because it kind of, at least in the Middle East, became a rich man's hobby. Like, it's not sustainable, and that was kind of what you already tapped on. It's that's not only a MENA problem. I mean, it's happening, globally. Like, teams are consolidating. That there's mergers, shutdowns, and riots are now taking steps. So we need, and to be honest, I think like the big problem here, it's because all the esports content is out there for free. Like, why does football work? Well, that's because there's licensing deals, and the leagues make money, and everybody gets a cut. Yeah, I know Loco is, I mean, but imagine you put a paywall on your platform, then like, would users accept that? Probably not, but they should. Like, I think we should start paying for esports, because then we can actually make this whole circus profitable for all of us, So, I mean, I'm sure
Yeah,
you can
somebody's
tap on.
always paying, right? So, and I think that's where I think there's structural issues that have to be addressed. I mean, I think teams by themselves cannot be sustainable in this environment if they don't have content creators,
Right.
because the shelf life of players is not as long, and that branding that is required to build a sustainable business, you need to get viewership, and the teams that don't win don't get prestige, and the teams that don't make content don't make money. Right? So you have this issue, and I think one of the ways out, like you're saying, is to have a subscription tier of some sort where people do subscribe, and that's something we are actually working on right now, so that exactly the problem that he's saying gets addressed. Because, finally putting it out on YouTube, you make no money, and YouTube doesn't care; it just moves on to the next content creator, and that's a problem.
Interesting. Yeah. So
And also it's the life cycle of a game.
Okay.
When you invest in teams, right? I mean, like what Klaus just said, he started with 1.6. Now, is anyone going to sponsor a 1.6 player today? Right? That's the life cycle of the game. And so when there are investments made in teams, and especially athletes, you got to make sure that, that investment kind of carries forward to the next big title that's going to come in, right? Because the life cycle of a game is not very large. When you talk about conventional sports, like football has been there since centuries.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not the case with esports. It's not one particular game.
That's
right.
true,
There are so many games with all different set of audiences, with different set of interests. There are people who love strategy games. There are people who love action games. And then obviously when it comes to investing in athletes, that life cycle of the game literally is a big risk that team owners take when, for example, if that games, stops having popularity. And a very good example of that is what happened recently in India when PUBG Mobile got banned.
Oh.
We had, so many teams who were sponsored, so many content creators who used to have a living on PUBG Mobile. And one fine day, the government just comes up and says, today is the last day of PUBG Mobile. Like, imagine, what that does to the entire ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need to imagine.
We lived it. We lived it. We both literally lived it. I mean, at that point of time, Gamerji was a platform which literally, PUBG Mobile was our bread and butter.
Yeah.
Right? And then suddenly one fine day, you are left with, literally 10% of our audience playing because everyone else used to play PUBG Mobile. And that's something that, is a big risk factor also that a lot of teams kind of have to take into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating about the PUBG Mobile going away. Can you imagine just waking up one day and discovering that soccer's been banned or something like that, and the effect on everything?
That's never going to happen, right? And that, unfortunately, and then the other thing is that soccer is not owned by, or football is not owned by one particular entity. Here, you're talking about publishers which have a lot of different things that they need to take care of, whether it be political, whether it be, licensing, whether it be content, which might be sensitive to a particular region, a lot of different things that kind of might, so the risk factor is very high when it comes to investing in just teams and athletes.
On the other side, what I would say is that for football, for a Mohamed Salah to be created takes 20, 30 years, because there has to be an older generation of infrastructure, and then 20 years for this particular player to make it through. Esports, there are newer stars being born. And I think in geographies like the Middle East and India, where we are starved for role models, from a branding perspective, they become extremely valuable.
Right.
And I think you're seeing that now with the esports stars in India who are doing really well in terms of, but obviously not everyone's going to be that, but that's the same thing for any performing art or sport.
Do you know what? You said something there that I want to come back to, but I've just realised we haven't heard from Christoph for a minute. So I want to just very briefly just talk about VR in esports, because you do something that's a little bit different from other folk here. Do you want to just talk about what sort of opportunities you see in that space that we should know about?
Yeah, actually, so this entire idea that we've been working on started out with the emergence of VR and other devices. By now, we are not super focused on purely VR anymore, because we obviously realized that the global audience is not on VR yet, and not anytime soon. So we're actually also more focused on the regular PC, console, and even browser version of this experience. Similar, you can imagine it's similar to like Roblox or Fortnite accessibility and in terms of events going on there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of obviously audience experience, it is a big opportunity because it is basically a more immersive, more interactive experience, which should drive, you know, engagement, willingness to pay in the future. So that's obviously one of our hypotheses. And the big tech companies are investing, which also then leads to, luckily now with Apple also having announced their headset, you just see that more and more tech corporates are also now shifting R&D budgets again in these directions. It's gonna be a long time until we see kind of the trickle-down effects of this, but like from our perspective, for example, 5+ years from now, we believe there will be healthier kind of investment ecosystems around XR again, because the headsets are kind of maturing. Apple's first generation won't be too exciting. It's obviously more a developer headset, but maybe 5+ years from now it is interesting. And then with all media and tech companies then having to think about this platform, there will be a lot of investment opportunities and also opportunities for everyone who's dealing with players, users, audiences to build new use cases there. And yeah, for us, it's just a bit of a, you know, let's make sure we're still around when that time comes.
Good. No, that's great. I'm a big believer in VR myself, and Apple's announcement was definitely interesting. I'm not going to pay $3,500 for a headset, but I'm interested in what it does to the market.
I wouldn't recommend it either. Yeah.
But let's go back there. We're kind of the last 5 or 6 minutes, and I will try and give some time for questions as well. But I've got plenty still I want to ask. This is a business conference after all, so let's talk a little bit about that. Brands and advertisers have started to recognize the potential of esports, and that's one revenue stream for people in the business, but many still haven't got involved. There's been a couple of panels about it this afternoon. I was interested to see what Aya from Pizza Hut was saying about what they've done. That was great. But how can we get other advertisers more involved in esports? Is there things we should be doing to make them feel comfortable and confident investing in the industry? Klaus?
Well, I mean, that's obviously like our bread and butter as YaLLa Esports. We are a marketing agency, but we only do basically campaigns that is around gaming. So the answer, how do we get more people involved, is education. Like it's, I mean, it's much better now again, because as we've talked, like when schools and governments and everybody's involved, it's not that much like, let's say, convincing that you need to do to get the brands involved. Actually, now it's almost like the brands want to do gaming, but they have no idea what to do. And usually they are trying to do the wrong things. So now it's like my job to educate them like what to do and calm them a bit down. Maybe also manage expectations, because many brands are kind of like, well, we'll just slap a logo on something gaming related and gamers will love us. And it's like, okay, like let's make this a bit more realistic. So yeah, it's a lot of education. And then like as a creative agency, we always try to figure out like a way to really, like we understand the gamers, then we need to understand their brand and try to like make something that is kind of cool for both ways, and as authentic as possible. And obviously, since we're in the Middle East, it's all about Arabic and the right language, cultural differences. So education, if I would sum it in one word.
I would add that it's important for everyone involved to not just look at the dollar spent right now, but all the dollars that could follow. So don't try to maximize the project that's there right now, because the return on invest that your partner or client gets may then be underwhelming for them if you overcharge. So just think about the long-term play here and what the long-term goal is, and that's just one recommendation I'd have, because I feel like sometimes people are a little bit too short-term oriented and don't think about the $100 that could follow after the first one spent.
Yeah, that's good advice. So what do you think?
No, and talking about the longer-term effect, I mean, most of the audience of gaming or esports is millennials and Gen Zs. Though they might not have the spending power today, but tomorrow they are actually going to be the spenders. And for a brand to look at it from a long-term perspective, they need to start investing in this audience today. And what better than gaming, which directly hits that target audience, which is going to be the tomorrow's spending audiences, right? So that is something which which definitely will, as Klaus said, once they are aware and educated about what the longer term benefits of investing in advertising and in gaming or esports is, definitely is something that will yield better ROIs and better fruits than compared to conventional mediums of marketing that they've been following since dog years now.
Right, makes sense. Anirudh.
Yeah, look, this has happened in time immemorial. When TV came up, it looked like the first shows looked like radio, and then advertisers were slow to. If you watch Mad Men, they put the TV guy at the back of the room, like, what the hell is television, right? It happened when, in my first company, we had to explain to people what YouTube is, right? This is as basic as that. And now today, like, you know, everyone has that in their media plan, right? So advertising and advertisers are always reactive and they follow attention. And I think it's very clear, 2020 and the lockdown made it very clear to people what their kids are doing. Yeah. And I completely agree with Klaus, like, the number of advertisers who reached out to me saying, hey, what do we do about gaming? Because they have no idea.
Right.
And for them, gaming is still Mario, right? Because that's what they played. But they don't know what like their kids are spending time in Roblox, or they're playing other games. So I think they're just now, I think getting the ROI right and just having certain success stories, you're going to see lots of advertisers move over across categories.
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of at the end. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask the panel while we've got them here? Oh, in the front row. Can I be rude and steal the mic? Thank you very much. I'll leave off the stage as well.
I just wanted to ask, so to go back to the finances behind esports, and considering all the stakeholders, who do you think is actually responsible for the finances? This can be to do with prize pools or tournaments, etc. Who do you think is essentially responsible?
Like, responsible for the finances of esports as a whole, kind of. Okay, yeah. Well, actually, what we already touched on here was that, you know, nobody owns football, but yes, somebody owns the leagues. That's kind of what Riot is now doing. They are kind of feeling a bit responsible for their league and maybe admitting some mistakes. So if I would have to like name one entity that is responsible, I would say it is the publisher, because at the end of the day, like, if there is a successful League of Legends esports, it is marketing and attention for Riot to then get more players in. But that's a very simplified answer, to be honest. I do think that it is kind of like a symbiotic ecosystem with the teams, with the players, and with everything. But if I have to say one, I would say it's the publisher.
Yeah, I would actually also agree, because it starts all with the product, and we talked about the shelf life or the lifetime of games, and you obviously have to see that commitment into the title and the excitement on the publisher side, and you know, just has to be reinvested, and then also into the esports ecosystem that drives that engagement. So they definitely, it's their work, their bread and butter, right?
And to add to it, I mean, they are the largest benefactors of any tournament, right? The organizer might suffer losses, the brands might not get the right set of eyeballs, but a publisher's game is regardless going to get popular by as many tournaments or events that are hosted for their title. So yes, the largest owners of the prize pool, or ideally the expenses, can be publishers. But with that, obviously, there has to be other avenues which fund that as well. You can't just put everything on the publisher saying, I mean, in the end, it's the organizer who wants to host the tournament. Yes, for the publishers, you know, own tournaments, that's a different story altogether. But when you talk about private tournaments, or essentially even scrims or daily tournaments like what we host, you know, that cost has to be split between organizer, the audience, the brands, and obviously also the publishers. So with still the largest owners being on the publisher, but still it has to be split.
Let me tell you, having worked with some of the sporting authorities, publishers are still 10x easier to deal with than any of the guys you mentioned. So, and it's taken them 100 years or so to figure out how to commercialize this stuff. And so I think that same thing will happen. You know, it happened with the Premier League. You saw what happened with the Super League that they were trying to create, right? So I think there is some maturity that's required. Like, esports is not actually that old, even though for us it looks like it's very old. whereas these sports have been around for 200 years and go all the way down to the school level. So a little bit of patience there. I think in the next 10 years, you will see sustainable models coming up.
Thank you very much. Look, there's a red light flashing at us here. You've been very patient. We've reached the end of the day here at GameExpo. So what we'll do, though, is we could have talked lots longer, and I know there'll be people who'll regret missing this panel. We'll put the recording on our website, and I'll probably follow up and ask you a couple of additional more questions, and we'll put it all together in a feature online. How about that for everyone? So let's do that. A round of applause for the panelists here today. Thanks very much, and thanks to Gamerji for sponsoring the track.